Wow. I had a fascinating conversation yesterday on Karen Hunter's radio program on Sirius XM. She's one of the smartest people doing radio in America right now, and has a great show in the afternoon. I think it runs from 5 to 6. Actually, I'm not sure, but it's on Sirius 126. It's 4 to 6, says Shano. Okay, thank you, Shano. And, we were kicking around this, what's going on in Baltimore things, and it occurred to me, and then I said this later on TV last night, and now I want to bring it to you here on radio. I mean, this literally, I've danced around some of these topics before, but it had never so clearly come together in my head, is that what we're seeing in Baltimore right now is a revolt. And it's a revolt on the edge of a revolution. Now, a revolution's only a revolution if it's successful in overthrowing the existing order or changing consequentially the existing order. But just consider some of the realities of Baltimore. And then I want to get into what happened when white people were confronted with something similar. Okay? So flashback to 1968. Grosse Pointe is probably or at least it was when I was growing up in 1968. I was 17 years old. Grosse Pointe was the fancy schmanciest suburb of Detroit. And at Grosse Pointe High School, on March 14th, 1968, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said, and I quote, "A riot is the language of the unheard." He said, "There are two Americas. One America is beautiful for its situation. In this America, millions of people have the milk of prosperity and the honey of equality flowing before them. I refer to that America as the clueless white privilege America." Back to Martin Luther King. He said, "This other America has a daily ugliness about it that transforms the buoyancy of hope into the fatigue of despair." Now, we've talked before on this program about the J-curve, about the idea that actually a number of people have posited this literally over the centuries. The revolutions or revolts don't happen when things get bad. Revolutions or revolts happen when expectations diverge from reality. So after 1965, 64 and 65, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act were signed. A lot of African Americans in this country thought, okay, cool. Now we're going to see Reconstruction actually happen. Right? Now we're going to see the fulfillment of the promise of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, of the end of the Civil War, of Abe Lincoln's sacrifice. Now we're going to see that. And not just Abe Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, it's a long list of people. And they didn't see it. And a few years later, Watts was on fire, Detroit was on fire, D.C. was on fire. So revolts happen not because things are bad. I've traveled all over the world. I've been doing international relief work since 1978 as a volunteer for the German Salem organization, saleminternational.org if you're curious. And I've been in places where people are literally dying right in front of me. In the case that I'm thinking of, it was, 1980 and no, it was 1970, whatever the year was. It was in Uganda. It was the year that Idi Amin got run out of town. And, there were literally people dying in some of the refugee camps. I saw it with my own eyes. I held a dying child. There was no revolt because the people didn't expect that it would produce anything better. There was just despair. So in 64 and 65, LBJ said, okay, great society, new way of living. We're gonna lift people out of poverty. And by the way, he did, just not enough. And you have the absolute right to vote. We're going to protect it. We're going to defend it. We're going to integrate the schools. We're going to make this stuff happen. It didn't work the way it was promised. People were upset. So why now? Well, hey, we've got a black president. We've got a black attorney general. We've got an African American on the Supreme Court. Over the last decade, maybe the last 15 years, and more black faces are appearing on television, in movies, in popular culture, and not in the quote traditional roles for people of color of, gangbangers and stuff like that, but rather as, beautiful people, seductresses even. I mean, Kerry Washington on Scandal. I'm not sure seductress is the right word, but, sex objects even. I mean, I remember so vividly back in the 60s, Dick Gregory saying, when I was growing up, the only black woman I ever saw in the media was Aunt Jemima, and nobody ever wanted to hop into bed with Aunt Jemima. And that's all changed, or is changing, let's say. But what is not changing is the actual status and nature of life for people of color in this country, particularly in Baltimore. Let me just share a couple quick things here with you, and I got some clips here about this as well. This from Bill Quigley over at Alternet. 10 shocking facts about Baltimore. Blacks in Baltimore are 5.6 times more likely to be arrested for possession of pot. Baltimore County has the 5th highest arrest rate for possession in the United States. 92% of marijuana possession arrests in Baltimore are African Americans, one of the largest racial disparities in the United States. The Baltimore Police Department, or the city, has paid out over $5.5 million just in the last 4 years for over 100 police brutality lawsuits, including beating up a pregnant woman, a 65-year-old church deacon, an 87-year-old grandmother. White babies born in Baltimore live 6 years longer than black babies born in Baltimore. African Americans in Baltimore who have AIDS, HIV, compared to white people in Baltimore who have AIDS, HIV, black people are 8 times more likely to die from complications. They're twice as likely to die from diabetes as white diabetics. Unemployment in Baltimore is 8.4% citywide, but in the African American community, it's at least double that. African-American babies in Baltimore are 9 times more likely to die before age 1 than white infants in the city. There's a 20-year difference in life expectancy between those who live in the most affluent neighborhoods in Baltimore and those in the poorest. The where did it go here? The outside agitators. 70% of the Baltimore Police Department does not live in Baltimore. 10% don't even live in the state. They live in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Virtually everyone who's been arrested actually lives in Baltimore, yet the press is talking about outside agitators. Who are the outside agitators? How about the police? And here's where it gets really bizarre. There is, to the best of my knowledge, only one country in the world right now that is actively practicing apartheid as a matter of law. That's Israel. And the Baltimore Police Department is sending their folks to Israel. In September 2009, members of the Baltimore PD, quote, toured and met with their Israeli counterparts to exchange information relating to best practices and recent advances in security and counterterrorism. This was according to the trip sponsor Project Interchange. A separate Israel tour organized by the neoconservative Jewish Institute for National Security saw members of the Baltimore PD begin the process of sharing lessons learned in Israel with their law enforcement colleagues in the United States. What happened? Back in Baltimore, the rate of citizens killed by police skyrocketed. The ACLU found 109 people died after encounters with Maryland police just between 2010 and 2014. 70% of those who died were black, 40% of them were unarmed.